Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Nova Perez. I'm a proud Yaru and Lunga woman of the Western East Kimberleys and the Bunich Gagadju peoples of the Western Arnhem Land region. Where I am privileged to host from today, I stand here on Larrakia country in the northern part of Australia, and I acknowledge their ancestors past, present and emerging, and I acknowledge that all First Nations people have never ceded their sovereignty, and I acknowledge their ongoing connection to their country, and also to continue their inherent responsibilities to their country. It is an absolute honour for me to be here today to facilitate this historical gathering of First Nations, Indigenous peoples and advocacy groups of 12 countries with the British monarch as a head of state on the eve of the coronation of King Charles. Without any further ado, I would like to ask everyone who's representing their respective countries to make a short introduction of themselves, and then we'll proceed to questions from the press. So if we could have the Antigua and Barbuda representative, if they could make their opening statement and introduction, please. Is Doberine with us this morning?
He dropped off.
Oh, she dropped out? Okay, maybe we'll go straight to Rawiwi Waititi from Aotearoa, please.
Kia ora, I ka mā tēnā tātou e ngai iwi take o te ao, nā mihi nui kia tātou, ko whakawhaiti nei, e runga i te mana, tātou tāngata, tātou iwi, tātou whenua. Nō reira, tēnei rā te mihi, mai I Aotearoa, kia koutou, e ngā kiri waiwhero, e whakapapatiai ki tā tātou whenua, me ngā taonga tuku I hoi waihoti au tātou mātua tīpuna, nei rā te mihi, nei rā te mihi, nei rā te mihi. My name is Rawiri Waititi. I'm the co-leader of the party Māori, the only Indigenous Tangata Whenua Party here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. There is no honour in this crown. It is tainted with the blood of Indigenous nations, and the throne on which he now sits upon is at the apex of white supremacy globally. The British royal family are war criminals who continue to flaunt their illegality in the face of world politics, and under the guise of celebration, pomp and ceremony, ask you to turn a blind eye to the genocide, rape and oppression they continue to be responsible for. This crown, both directly and through its successor colonial governments, continues to be an illegal occupation of hundreds of Indigenous nations throughout the world. This crown has rained war upon every continent on earth, has inherited power based on stolen wealth, and is void of morality. It literally kills for power and has done so for centuries. To expect those climbing out from beneath generations of colonial violence and oppression to celebrate the British Crown's latest succession, you cannot ask us to be complicit in the ongoing rape of our own nations. This is happening in plain sight, in front of the world, and instead, humanity must require more of themselves than to expect Indigenous peoples to be complicit in their own colonisation. We will not support the colonial fiction that underpin and continue the continued obliteration of our peoples and our places. The British Crown should be on notice that the Indigenous world is rising, and they will be held accountable for every single atrocity committed in their name. This Crown is racist. The native peoples of this world have been an inconvenience to their empire and greed. This Crown prefers to relegate entire nations to footnotes in their quest for power. The Indigenous are history's collateral damage to the British royal family's insatiable appetite for superiority. So no, perhaps asking us to celebrate is a step too far. The British Crown is a thief, a murderer, and a coward, heavy under the weight of its oppression. It is a war bonnet for those Indigenous nations who've encountered it. It cannot be worn by the moral or the brave. It would break them both. It is coward's crown, a thief's crown. No single piece of jewelry has been represented so much murder and pain. In closing, to the new sovereign of England, We say history will judge whether you have the moral or intellectual capacity to shoulder responsibility for your family's heinous legacy. It is beyond you to restore its honor. The harm caused by the crown is now intergenerational and irreparable. Indigenous blood stains the throne you sit upon. We do not consent. We do not surrender. We do not cede. We do not submit. We, the Indigenous, are rising. Like a rumble under your throne, we will upset the colonial legal fictions you've built your house of inequity upon. We will survive you. Watch us. We will teach you what honor looks like. Kia ora tata.
Thank you so much. Okay, next up we have Talia Gray from Australia.
Skawambana, Yamadumarang, Yuanyande, Taylor. So hello, greetings. I hope you're well. My name's Taylor. I just want to acknowledge the country that I'm meeting on today, the Awabakal and the Warramai people, whose lands sovereignty has never been ceded on these stolen lands. I also want to acknowledge my other First Nation aunties on the panel, in particular Nova and Lydia, who have been instrumental to the cause. And I see Craig there, the co-chair of our movement as well. This is such an important movement, and we are so pleased to be joining forces with countries that share similar hopes and aspirations to become an independent nation away from the British monarch. We have been saying for decades that we are the descendants of injustice from the wrongs of the colonial empire. Our people have sent numerous petitions demanding change to assist in rectifying the ill condition of First Nations people here. Yet we remain the sickest people in our country. We remain the poorest people in our country. We remain the most incarcerated people in our country. We are more likely to die from suicide. We have no treaty lands, and our cries are often overlooked and ignored. We don't forget the deafening silence of the monarch. We currently have at least 32,000 sacred items currently held across 43 UK institutions, important objects, significant items, and even our bodies. We are calling for a referendum to become an independent nation, an independent country, to have our own head of state away from the British monarch. We are calling on King Charles III to come to Australia. We are demanding a formal apology for the effects of colonialism on Indigenous people and enslaved people. We are calling on the need for reparations by redistributing the wealth of the British Crown. We are demanding repatriation of artefacts and human remains of our old people. The British Crown has deliberately engineered our displacement. It is time to start the process of consultation and building a nation that works for everybody.
Thank you so much, Taylor. Next up, we have Dr. Namimbi Hall from the Bahamas.
Greetings from Nima, the indigenous land of the Lucayan people, known today by the colonized name of Nassau, Bahamas. I am Dr. Nyambi Hall Campbell, Dean, Chair of the Bahamas National Reparations Committee. As a child, my father used to tell me that the sun never set on the British Empire, and I did not know then what that statement meant. I've come to learn that it was a reference to the global expanse of the British monarchy's seemingly unquestionable thirst for colonization. For the majority of the people that inhabit this land today, these atrocities began with the Mayafa, or the transatlantic slave trade, then continued through the underdevelopment of colonization. And although we will celebrate our 50th year of independence in July, the vestiges of this history continue to display its dire consequences. For these consequences and for the sins of the past, we stand with the CARICOM Reparations Commission and their 10-point plan for reparations. We invoke the words of our powerful ancestor, Tony McKay, and demand that King Charles now pay me for my blood in the water, pay me for my son and my daughter, pay me for my brothers and sisters, pay me for all of my dead, pay me for the blood that you shed, pay me what you owe me. I come to collect everything that you owe me, reparations now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Namimbi. Next up, we have Wellington Ramos from Belize.
My name is Wellington Ramos, Seremehun Sumut. Welcome to all who are here today. I'm a Garifuna. Who is a Garifuna? A Garifuna is a mixture of indigenous Kalinago and Africans who lived in a place called Urume They were there centuries, living independently in their nation state. The Spanish came, we fought them off. The French came, we fought them off, and they signed a treaty with us. British went to war with the French. They gave our land to the British. They came in 1773, we fought them off. We have fought the good wars. What they did, they took 5,000 of our people and they imprisoned them in an island called Belize. In 2 weeks, they shot and killed about 2,500 and they buried them right there in Belize. In 1797, they removed our people from there to the Bay Islands in Honduras, and they just dumped us there. Our names were changed, and we were left to die. Eventually, what happened, we moved along the coast to Honduras, Guatemala, Belize, Nicaragua, and now, out of that 2,500 people, we number about 600,000 worldwide. The effects of genocide that was committed against our people has not been removed from our minds and from our hearts and our souls. We are still suffering from those effects. In all these countries where we live today, it's just a continuation of genocide by these neo-colonialist countries. We are fighting for our rights and we want our nationhood status. We want to maintain our land. We want to be respected. And in Belize currently, we have the indigenous Mayas. They have won a judgment against the Belize government, and the Belize government has refused to abide by the court's judgment. We are planning to do the same thing, to go to court in all these countries where we live. In Honduras, we have been to court, and the government of Honduras have refused to grant us our land rights. This struggle is an ongoing struggle. Our people believe that as long as you live, you must always fight and be willing to die for what you have. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Wellington. Next, we have Regional Chief Terry TG from Canada.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the territory that I'm calling from, the unceded, unsurrendered, continuing occupied territory of the Lheidli T'enneh, the Dakat people in North Central British Columbia. I'm the Regional Chief of British Columbia. I just want to state that I'm here in solidarity with many of my Indigenous brothers and sisters within the Commonwealth who have experienced death of our languages, death of our culture, death of our people. In Canada, we've experienced the genocidal acts of this government. We've experienced the genocidal acts of colonization, and we renounce and we encourage and we demand that King Charles III repudiate all doctrines, the doctrine of discovery, the doctrine of terra nullius, that stole our lands and stole our children. And as you've seen over the last several years, the stolen children have been found in some of the graves, the mass graves at what we call residential schools. We called upon the Pope and the Vatican to apologize, and that's what exactly happened. We encourage and we demand that the King Charles to do the same. King Charles III, here is an opportunity to make things right. Here is an opportunity to reset the relationships with the Indigenous peoples within the Commonwealth. Far too often, many of our nations do not listen to the Indigenous peoples. We have the very fortunate experience here in Canada that right now we're implementing the United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, not only in this province of British Columbia, but in Canada. And even Canada, as a country, have denounced the doctrine of discovery, the doctrine of terra nullius. So as we move forward in this new relationship, I would say, here's the opportunity for King Charles III to reset this relationship. This long, terrible history of genocide that we've all experienced within many of our respective countries. We are turning the page. We are turning the page, and perhaps we can compel the king to state that he wants to be on the right side of history, to repatriate our ancient artifacts, to repatriate our people, to denounce the old doctrines, and perhaps repatriate our really reparations to our Indigenous peoples in our respective countries. I stand here in solidarity with many Indigenous brothers and sisters throughout Canada. I stand here with many of our Indigenous peoples throughout the world. And I thank you all for coming here, and that there is strength in numbers. And perhaps that King Charles III will listen and heed our call, because this is the best way forward. Thank you, Nova. Masaicho.
Thank you, Regional Chief Terry TG. Next, we have Ali Gill from Grenada. Is Ali on this morning? Okay, if not, we'll move to Professor Rosalie Hamilton from Jamaica from the Advocates Network, who's been instrumental in pulling this together. Thanks, Rosalie.
Thank you so much, Nova. You know, I am Rosalie Hamilton. I am co-chair of the Advocates Network, and we're a group of individuals and organizations focused on advocacy for good governance and human rights. And we address this every day, and we see the work that we do as institutional legacies of the institution of slavery and colonization. We grapple today with gender-based violence and child abuse, legacies of decades of inhumane treatment of our people. We inherited an unequal education system. We still grapple with that today. Poverty, landlessness, 20% of our population living in squatting communities. We still struggle today with the rights to access our beach because of colonial laws. A number of issues all are coming to head as we move towards a republic. We want to change the top-down governance arrangement we've inherited, where only a few benefit from our political system, to a more inclusive bottom-up approach to governance that is in the hands of the Jamaican people. And we want to move towards a state, a republic in which the people are sovereign. So we join the First Nations, Indigenous people, and other human rights groups and advocacy groups because we have a shared experience of colonial exploitation and crimes against humanity. And together, we can amplify our cause. It is a just cause, and it can no longer be ignored. We have an opportunity. We may not forget, most of us will not forget that painful past, but we certainly have an opportunity to repair the wrongs of the past and to write a new narrative for a more inclusive, just, more humane future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosalie. Next, we have Stanford Tokayo from Papua New Guinea. Is Stanford on? No, we might try and get back to him later. Okay, Carla Astafan from St. Kitts and Nevis.
Nova, we have Callan here from Jamaica, who,
okay,
in the absence of the others, would introduce himself.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Usa kasida yukuno, ni morish kaimandiri, kasike yukaeki yame wanida ka. Ikonia wakia waha, wamun woperitono, wailino. Greetings, my relatives. My name is Nibonrish Kaiman Kalan, Chief of the Jamaican Hummingbird Taino people, a member of the Yame Council of Indigenous Leaders, Jamaica's Council of Indigenous Leaders, which includes our relatives, the Maroon people. And we're here today for those of the past, our ancestors, and those who are yet to come, the future generation. Our Indigenous people and our ways is set in honoring those who are to come, the future generations. And we believe that for that to be done, we need to close the circle of healing. And for that, we need this apology. We need the return of our ancestral items and their ancestral remains. We need to begin the process of healing. For much has been taken, much shall be given. And it is this time that is a special time. Tomorrow, for us on this island, is a day of mourning. It is the day that Columbus first came to our island and set these atrocities on foot. Many speak about colonization, but it is the indigenous people of the Caribbean that were the first to be impacted. So we call upon the monarchy, we call upon King Charles III to right these wrongs of their ancestors and to extend his hand in a way of peace and unity. Hahom and Hankatu. And so it is.
Thank you so much, Kalan. Okay, so we'll go to Carla Astafan from St. Kitts and Nevis. Do we have them on? No, okay. We go to Earl Basquet from St. Lucia. I know Earl's on. He spoke earlier on.
Yes,
Here we go.
yes, I am. Yes, I am. And welcome. And it's good to be. It's very much pleasure to be with and to share with all of you our story in St. Lucia. Of course, the National Reparations Committee that I represent, our responsibility is to implement the mandate of CARICOM in pursuit of reparations from Britain and the European Union for slavery and native genocide. And in that respect, we will equally pursue the cause of reparations for slavery and native genocide. But we also wish to point out that in as much as we do not have active indigenous peoples entities, the research into the history of our indigenous people is a work in progress, which is being undertaken by the Monsignor Dr. Patrick Anthony Folk Research Center and other member organizations of the National Reparations Council. However, we must also point out that, as continues to be the case 500 years after the doctrine of discovery was implemented, so that the Europeans could have come to commit the crimes of destruction in our native lands on ships with crosses on their sails, carrying soldiers accompanied by priests with rosaries around their necks and in their hands to commit the atrocities of genocide and destruction of civilizations between the places called, as far apart as a place called Australia, and that in Dominica, Waitikubuli, and in St. Lucia, Ianola, the land of the iguanas. Our first people, however, 571 years after Columbus, their bones and burial grounds continue to turn up these days as we speak, including this year, on construction sites in St. Lucia, Trinidad, Dominica, Jamaica, across the region. And that is part of the inspiration for us to continue digging our history and to be able to work with organizations and entities who are here. And finally, we want to point out that we have a unique position of having been the victims of slavery 14 times between two European nations, from the standpoint that 14 wars were fought between Britain and France over St. Lucia, and all that changed were the flags of each of the winning countries, but the chains remain around the feet of our ancestors. And in pursuit of reparations for them, we will also do so for the descendants of the ancestors, like our brother who spoke in Jamaica on behalf of the Council of Indigenous People. Glad to be here. and our solidarity is with everybody.
Thank you so much, Elle. We'll go back to Stanford Tokoa from Papua New Guinea, who fell off, but he's back with us now. Thanks, Stanford. Are you there, Stanford? You might have to unmute yourself. There we go. Stanford.
Yes.
Yes.
My name me Stanford long Papua New Guinea. Me representing Papua New Guinea na calling you Sals long Toksore go long online where you've been bagarab in Pinis. My name is Stanford Tokoa from Papua New Guinea. I now join the other Commonwealth countries to call upon King Charles to say sorry and apologize to the indigenous communities of the countries that has been colonized by your colonies, by the Commonwealth. As a Commonwealth country, as a head of the Commonwealth countries, you claim to be sitting on the righteous chair, and you have to now tell the world. You have to tell the world that you can say sorry to the indigenous communities that are living today, because the pain is still there. The pain has been there and still going to continue to live with the children that are yet to come. And for us to be happy and live together in this world, and you claim to be a peacemaker, you have to now tell the world. You have to tell the world that, yes, I'm sorry for what the wrongs that we've done to the indigenous communities. The genocide that has been so huge to those communities, which are so painful, and we're living with those pain. You have to now come out and say sorry, so that world can hear and world can see that you are the real king and you are the real concern for the Commonwealth countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Stanford. Do we have Doberine on the online from Antigua?
Yes,
Barbuda?
you do.
Yeah, fantastic.
My name is Doberine Omad. I'm chairperson of the Antigua and Barbuda Reparations Support Commission, a member of the CARICOM Reparations Commission, and of course a full supporter of the 10-point plan, the CARICOM 10-point plan for reparatory justice. We hold our reparations struggle as part of that decolonization process. The call to end the shameless colonial governance in this area that has existed in various forms since the 16th century. And also we call for the repair of the damage that has been done to our people and our countries through the slave trade, through slavery, and the genocide of indigenous people. We call on King Charles to become a major player, a leader in the efforts to make this world a better place for all mankind, making reparations to all the enslaved and colonized people, and also freeing the British of its horrible guilt. I thank you.
Thank you. Okay, has everyone spoken from their respective countries? I think they pretty much all have. So we've got a couple of questions that have come through, but first off, Rosalie, may I invite you just to speak with regards to how this group came about, because I know that you reached out to us and you know, you were instrumental in being able to pull this together. So if I can invite you to briefly talk about how this came about.
Well, you know, the conversation started with yourself and of course, Craig Foster, who is on. So I'd love Craig to jump in. It's shared experience as we move towards a republic and wanting to understand our own experiences, what we're going through, to deepen that, you know, shared experience of what it takes. And it's out of that reaching out and, you know, getting more information, and out of that dialogue, we felt that we should do more than perhaps have a press conference or even online meeting. I think that was an initial thought that we would do that, but we should do something very collaborative way that could make a bold statement. Now, what it did is it brought many of us together, many of us who didn't know each other. And there's some shared experiences that, you know, we can now talk about. For example, a lot of Indigenous people talk about that whole genocidal experience that they've had at the beginning of this whole period of colonization, etc. But our own research done by one of Jamaica's Harvard professors, Orlando Patterson, pointed out that in the enslavement of Africans, there was genocide, and that they estimated nearly 6 million Africans that were killed across that period. And that kind of conversation creates the nexus and the shared experience that we understand that whole experience of coming from a people whose history was one in which we were, there was an attempt to wipe us all out. And that kind of learning is taking place, and we're beginning to share our experience. But I think it stemmed, just to come back to the starting point, it's really because we wanted to understand a little more about our Republican experience. And so there's a question I noted in the chat: how does all of this tie to Republicanism? From our perspective, the problems we face today are rooted in the past. And it is when we understand the past, understand its present manifestation, its systemic form, the institutional structural arrangement that persists, that we have a better approach to changing in the future. And that's the link as I see it.
Okay. Thank you, Rosalie. Lydia, Senator Lydia Thorpe, who's our First Nations woman in the Australian Parliament here. Question, we've sent this to the King, but what message does this send to the rest of the world? And what are you hoping for people to take away from this?
The truth. We need the world to know the true history of colonization and the effects that it, as you've heard, still has on our people. We're still the sickest, poorest people in our own country. We're the most incarcerated here in Australia. Our prisons are full of our babies and our women and our men. So we want the world to know that the violence and the dispossession of our lands and our people continues today with systemic racism, as you've heard from Sister Rosalie. So I think with truth will then come healing. We need the King to acknowledge this pain and suffering and crimes against humanity so that we can heal as a globe. I mean, we're in a climate crisis because of colonization. They've not only destroyed our people and our future, they've destroyed our land and our water and our air. So it needs to bring the world together, right the wrongs of the past, acknowledge, and let's go forward. Let's negotiate what reparations look like. But in the meantime, give us back our people so we can bury our people on our own lands where they belong, and give us back what you stole. You are recipients of stolen wealth, which, you know, comes back to being a thief and a murderer. So at least acknowledge the wrongs so that we can have the start of a healing process and get rid of this systemic racism that we're dealing with today. And we need everybody to come on board. It's not a big ask. We just want the war to end on our people in these countries that have been subjected to genocidal acts.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Rawiwi, can I ask this question of you? How do you see the process of repatriations and repatriation happening, and what would be the best practice for this to occur?
What we're doing is we're talking to, and I'd just like to support the Senator's quarter, we're talking to a thief, a murderer, and a coward. And so it's very difficult to be able to have those discussions when you're that person. My thing is every country is going to be different. Here in Aotearoa, we have Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed in 1840. And it was an agreement between the Crown and ngā rangatira o ngā hapu o Aotearoa, New Zealand. And what the treaty did was it allowed for governance, kāwanatanga, the word is kāwanatanga, governance of the British Crown over its own people. That was Article 1. We have honoured that. There has been a government here since 1854. And so tangata whenua, peoples of this land have honoured that. Article 2 was the protection of the pre-existing rights of tangata whenua. The protection of the pre-existing rights of tangata whenua to have full and exclusive rights to our domains, to our states, to our lands, to our waters, to our oceans, to our people, and to our taonga, to our treasures. Article 3 was to be treated as equals. None of those things have happened since 1840. In actual fact, the opposite has happened. And like in Australia, as mentioned by Senator Lydia Thorpe, we are the most incarcerated peoples in the world per capita. Our male prison population make up 54% of those are Māori. 67% of the female population here in Aotearoa are Māori. We die 7 to 10 years earlier than everybody else. We are landless. We are homeless in our own lands, regardless of being houseless, which is a totally different issue. And so the way forward, I think, is if we continue to stay together like this, as an Indigenous peoples, as the red-skinned peoples of this planet, we must stick together. We cannot do this in isolation. And the United Nations, formed in the aftermath of Hitler's hideous regime, are silent on multiple similar and ongoing atrocities committed year after year in the name of the British Crown against Indigenous peoples. We cannot put our trust in the United Nations and forums like this. We got to put our trust in ourselves. We've got to believe in ourselves. I believe in you. You believe in me. We've got to believe in Indigenous solutions. They are now coming to mine our knowledge to fix climate change. We must be at the forefront of climate change. We must be at the forefront of healing this planet. Only Indigenous knowledge will do that. And the way forward is for us to stick together in solidarity and move as Indigenous peoples, red-skinned peoples of this earth. Kia ora tata.
Thank you, Rui. I'll go now to Regional Chief Terry TG. I understand that Charles and his wife last year visited Canada, and he made the statement last year that he was deeply touched when he met many of those he engaged with in the ongoing process to reconciliation. I have the question to you is, what would it mean for Charles to acknowledge the suffering that has been caused and issue an apology?
I think it's one of those things where we've seen an apology come before, such as the Pope. And I think, you know, our stories from around the world are very similar. We're cut from the same cloth. Here in Canada, as we come out of the pandemic, we had the highest infection rate. We had the highest death rate. We're suffering from the opioid crisis. And many of our Indigenous peoples are displaced by climate change and the exasperation of climate change within British we're experiencing right now. So the King Charles III, who really, I think, has come forward in terms of his views on climate change, the solutions are within the Indigenous peoples. Certainly, we make up about 5% of all the populations around the world. We have 20% of the lands around the world, and 80% of that 20% are conserved by Indigenous peoples. And why is that? It's because we understand and are connected to our lands. We have solutions for climate change, and conservation of biodiverse areas are important in terms of climate change. And many Indigenous peoples, such as those from Tuvalu, will become, in the near future, climate change refugees. And that is a result of colonization. So as we move forward with King Charles, an apology is one thing in terms of a gesture, but really putting action behind it is necessary to make sure that what he's saying is of meaning to Indigenous peoples. So the denouncing of the doctrines, repatriation of our artifacts and our remains of our Indigenous peoples, and everything that we call for in terms of really of what apology would mean comes from the Indigenous peoples. And part of that is knowing and understanding that we do have a worldview that is.
I think Terry's just dropped out there, and I think he has to leave. So thank you so much, Terry, for your contribution from your representation in Canada. I'd like to go to Callan with regards to Jamaica moving towards a republic. How does becoming a republic tie in with this statement? Is this necessary requirement for us to make progress?
Of course, because in our Indigenous principles looking towards future generations, we need to heal the wrongs of the past. We need to heal the atrocities that have taken place. And a lot of the issues that we have experienced here in Jamaica with independence are inherited issues. So we have to go to the root, and the root is coming from the monarchy. Once we start at that point, then we can start to dismantle all of the issues that have been embedded in our systems and reconstruct them. That is why we have so much work that we are doing now as it relates to our constitution. We have laws that were put in place to silence our people. We have systems that were put in place to promote paper genocide, writing our people out of existence, and in some spaces, confusing and confounding the minds of the youth so that they were participants in this. We have individuals in our community today that they will tell you that their grandmother is Indigenous and things their grandmother did and deny those rights for themselves. So it's a lot of work, and it is spiritual work. It is work that right now we're going through droughts and having issues, and our rain semis are in the British Museum, our rain artifacts and spirits that were honored for centuries. So we need this movement to continue. We need this to continue even after these activities that we want to take place. We need this unity from each other so that we can share and help, because land back movement is for everyone. Becoming a republic is something that will benefit everyone. And us having our own system amongst ourselves of united Indigenous and Indigenous advocates, to me, has more power than a United Nations. Home.
Thank you, Cullen. I'm going to go to you, Dr. Nyambi Hall. What do you all think, well, this is a collective question, but I'll go to you first, about the return of land, including land areas called Crown land and repatriations for continued stolen generational wealth that continues to this day?
The issue of Crown land is a very big issue in the Bahamas. We see even the fact that the term is called Crown land, right, is problematic because the land really belongs to the people. And we have systems, our government systems are entrenched in this legacy of colonization, so that our governments sparse out this land in ways that does not really feed the development of the people. So all of these things are connected to this history of colonization, and all of these issues are issues that we're trying to address through reparations.
Okay, thank you. Taylor or Lydia, did you want to speak to that as well? I mean, Crown land's a big issue for us here as First Nations people in Australia.
Yeah, if I could just dive into that as well. Like when we look at Crown lands, I guess for First Nations people in Australia, the only way we can claim native title is over Crown lands, and often our rights are restricted. I mean, I know there's a case here, I think it might even be in Queensland, where First Nation people had rights over the seabed, but it was quite limited. We're not allowed to have, rights and interests on a commercial quantity basis. So we can only take, for instance, a fish or two off the seabed, but we have these massive corporations that can harvest fish, by the dozens, by the hundreds. But First Nations people can't do that. We are landless people. We do not have access to these rights the same way the private interest groups like mining companies, like fisheries, and same as Crown lands. I mean, we don't have freehold title here in Australia. We don't even have treaty lands. It is an issue.
Okay, thank you for that. I might actually just go to Lisa for the First Nations-led Republic. I know that you've had this movement for a while. Lisa, did you want to contribute anything to this discussion? Lisa? Yeah.
I'm trying to unmute myself.
You're unmuted now. Yep.
Okay. So I'm Lisa Smith. I started the First Nations-led Republic movement. I'm a Kamilaroi, Yampa and Yuwallaroi woman. I started it so that we can dismantle the colonial system that is in Australia. And in the wake of what's happening in the world right now, this has commenced at a critical time in our history. So it's important that colonial institutions such as the Crown and our government to make clear the history and the truth of colonisation and the continued colonial policies and governing practices that continue to harm our people, planet and animals. We need change, not only for us, but for the planet and our survival. So like Taylor was saying, we need to change a lot now, and it starts with the Crown and recognising our history and the truth and where we can go with that to help further our future generations, because it's scary right now. Our kids are dying. People are in prisons, are pretty much being slaved in there. Like, they spend more money on prisons than they do on housing people. It's wrong. And there's so many things that need to change now for our future. And that's what I'd like to.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, and I really appreciate what you're being able to do at the grassroots level. I think we missed Wellington in the opening remarks from Belize. Wellington, if you'd like to contribute to the discussion.
Yes, the issue of Crown land is a problem in Belize and in most countries. In our case, when we were dumped in Roatan, Honduras, the British were squatting. Because, the treaty in 1494 gave Spain the entire Western Hemisphere, except for Brazil. So the British were given permission by the Spanish to only cut logwood and mahogany in Belize, not to have any farms, not to put up no military structures. So we moved from Roatan, Honduras to Belize, and we were told we can only live in the area which the British had no control over. And in 1859, the British signed a treaty with Guatemala. After they signed that treaty, they came to us and said, look, you guys got to pay us taxes. We were living there from 1802, and they came in 1859, signed this treaty with Guatemala and wanted us to pay taxes. So they decided, you know what? This is now Crown land. You guys got to pay taxes. If you don't pay no taxes, then you all got to go and live somewhere else. We said, no, we're not going nowhere. So what happened, the British decided to have two sets of Crown lands, one for the native Mayas who've been living there for thousands of years, and for us. So they have been using this Crown land 10-year system. So when these countries became independent, everything is based on what the British left. So there's little difference between colonialism and neo-colonialism. In fact, these people that are running these countries today are just as bad or even worse. That's what's happening. So now what we got to do? We got to go to court and fight. And every time we go to court and we get a judgment, they still refuse to abide by the court judgment. They really don't care. These people are just about getting everything for themselves, enriching themselves, giving everything to their family members, their friends, and their cronies, and to hell with the rest. All this talk about democracy is more hypocrisy. These people are not democratic. They're greedy. They want everything for themselves, and they're not going to give you nothing. If you don't fight, you don't get nothing. And if you fight, these people will kill you. So it's a day-to-day struggle. We don't know how this is going to end, but we can't stop fighting. And like somebody said earlier, we need all the indigenous people in the world to come together and let these people know we're not taking this no more. Because all the wealth that they accumulated for themselves is because of the indigenous people and the colonization and slavery that they did. And they call themselves Christian and humans. These people don't care about nobody. If you don't fight, they're going to keep taking advantage of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wellington. Have we had Doberine from the Antigua Barbuda speak? I think we couldn't get through to them.
Yes, he introduced earlier.
Oh, okay. So I guess, is there anyone else that would like to contribute to any of the discussions around the repatriations, Crown land?
Nova.
Yes, okay. Thank
I
you.
noticed my name changed, but it's okay. I'm Egbert Shaka Ihinio. I'm the president of the Garifuna Nation. The Garifuna Nation, as referred to by, just to make a sign back in history, were referred by the Europeans, referred to us as Black Arabs. We're Black Arabs, indigenous to the Caribbean. Our point of departure is Saint Vincent. My folks in songs, folklore refer to Saint Vincent as Yurume. The British, the Spanish before them, and the French before the British were always at war with us and gave us these names, labeled us as criminals, warlike, and made us feel like we were the perpetrators when they were actually it. So we, the Garifuna Nation, are working on both fronts. One, to dismantle the colonial structures, to refer to us as requiring some kind of paper, but we are presenting the European, perhaps, model, at the same time claiming our existence as indigenous people to the Caribbean. So we are in Saint Vincent, we are in Nicaragua, we are in Guatemala, we are in Honduras, we are in the United States. That comprises the Garifuna Nation of over 600,000 people and counting. And we are saying and supporting you with reparations for the King Charles, or no King Charles, to start a discussion on reparation to dismantle these colonial systems that destroyed the indigeneity of the Garifuna Nation. So we are in solidarity with our indigenous people throughout the world. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I guess going forward, you know, if we can collectively talk now about, you know, what are the next steps? I mean, we've started a petition here in Australia where we've called on people to sign the petition in acknowledgement and support of the statement, which has been fantastic. And the comments around that have been, and I think we're up near 2,000 people. I guess, Rosalie, did you want to talk to what are the steps going forward from this historical gathering? And I'll invite others to contribute. Yeah.
You know, it will evolve based on our own respective contributions, but I do want to say that we're here in part because of the tremendous work that Senator Thorpe and Jimmy did as well in bringing people together and finding people and reaching people in the region. I think what is very clear from the conversation today and what has happened in the background is that we do have a shared experience. And the question is, we now have the technology that can link us, and what do we do with this? And our first effort was to say, let's join our voices together. Let's make a loud noise on the occasion of the coronation to say, we're not concerned about a coronation of a king right now. We're still in the throes of a decolonization process and unraveling the wicked institutions that were set up to oppress our people. And whether it is through a movement to become a republic, whether it is the efforts to regain land, whether it is through issues having to do with, self-esteem and life. I mean, we're all here victims of racism. And I think our collective efforts, not only to undo the past, has the huge potential to create a better future. And I think if we find ways, and of course, we're going to continue to dialogue, we can engage the conversation in a way that not only tackle these issues, the issue of climate change, for example, was mentioned. This is an existential threat for all of us, especially in the Caribbean and on small island states. And so there's a lot to do to tackle some of these issues. And as we try to unravel it, as we try to push towards solutions like reparation, I think we can find the kinds of interventions and activities that can ultimately address our needs and create a better world. We have not yet come up with any tangible things, yes, but I think we have the potential of doing that in our ongoing dialogue. I'd love to hear what Craig has to say. I know, Craig, you've been very silent.
Can I make a contribution to this part of the discussion? Sure. I think what we need to do is, and I'm quite happy to be the first cab off the rank and say that we're committed to continuing these discussions. We're committed to continuing this group of people and not just use this catalyst event as the event that brings us together. This is not like colonization where it was a historical event. Colonization is an ongoing action. And so we need to counter that by making sure that we have our own ongoing actions. And so I'm quite prepared to be part of the discussions around how we continue to talk to each other, how we continue to stand in solidarity, how we continue to stand as the red-skinned peoples of this world, the indigenous peoples, the peoples of this earth. And so, and the very earth that we stand on. And so I've been really empowered by the kōrero today, by the contributions that everybody has made today. I'm empowered that we represent so many other different nations and colonies across the globe. And this is our opportunity now, is to unite ourselves. In order to unite ourselves, we must continue this dialogue. We must continue to meet together. And Aotearoa is right on board with creating something absolutely historical, but absolutely beautiful as Indigenous peoples of this world. My brothers and sisters, I greet you all. Kia ora tata.
Thank you, Rawiwi. I think we've just got to go now to Stanford. He just wanted to contribute before we close today's gathering. Are you there, Stanford?
Yes. Thank you very much for this opportunity. I think I see that we have got this appreciation and one spirit to talk about how we have been treated, how our ancestors, how the past generation has been treated by the British Empire. And I see it is very good, and we have to keep this group going forward. So we continue to maintain and contribute, and we will continue to knock at the doors of the King Charles until he says sorry, until he repatriates, and until he accepts what he claims every time. Therefore, we will continue to do this, and we will continue to push for this one, because the hatred is still within us. We feel we have been robbed. The genocide, the evil that has been done by the British Empire is still in us, and it's growing in us. So, for us to come out and have a peace in the community, we really need the King Charles to say sorry. So we have to continue to maintain this group and push for it. Thank you.
Greetings, Nova.
Yeah.
I just wanted to share one statement before my brother Rawiri Waititi leaves, is that I believe one of the things that we should be looking into doing next is amongst ourselves drafting a unity declaration so that future generations are aware that we are not only united as as members of the Commonwealth, we're united as Indigenous people, as custodians, as earth keepers, time keepers, day keepers, as keepers of our medicines and the solutions that this nation, this world, and this globe need now. That should be one of our next actions as well. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Kalan. Is there any more closing remarks? Senator Thorpe, did you want to make any closing remarks already? Yeah.
We've started a revolution here, and we're all fighters, and we all have responsibility to our old people, our ancestors, our land, our water, and we need to build this movement within our own communities and countries and bring everyone else on board. And we have the power. This is what the colonial system is afraid of, and this is what they've succeeded in trying to do for hundreds of years, is keep us apart. We have the power and we must use it now. It's now or never, because we know the situations of our countries and our people, and we've had enough. We are becoming extinct in our own rights, in our own countries, and so is our animals and totems, land and water. It is no better time than to start this revolution now. It's already started. So we have to stay together. And I agree with you all. I stand in solidarity with you all. And I will use my power as a senator in the federal parliament here to bring to light here, but also around the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Thorpe. Is there anyone who'd like to make a closing remark? I know that we're heading towards, well, we've gone over time now, but if there's no other closing remark, anyone would like to contribute before we?
Yes, I want to say one last thing.
Yeah.
Solidarity, I want to say something, Wellington. Brother Kalan Nimingri from Jamaica, we have established people-to-people relationship by signing a declaration, recognizing ourselves as people. And we must keep these structures, we challenge the structures of CARICOM, we challenge the structures of UN to make sure that our voices, collective voices, are heard at these platforms. Over to you, Wellington.
One of the biggest challenges we have is the country where we live in today. These people want to seek reparations on our behalf when they are violating our human rights. So we have to confront them. We cannot be violating our human rights, have foreign debt, owe all this money in our name, and you don't give us nothing, and you still want to seek reparations on our behalf. That is going to be our biggest challenge.
Thank you for that, Wellington. Is there anyone else that wants to make a closing remark? Dr.
Just to say thank you for your leadership of the press conference and for your efforts in pulling all of this together. Thank you so much. Very much appreciated. It was a pleasure working with you.
It's a pleasure. Thank you to everyone. And yes, let's stand in solidarity together, strength in numbers. And thank you all. Much love.
One love.
One love.